Welcome, dear viewers. For more exclusive, thrilling stories every week, join our membership. Sit back, relax, and sip your coffee. Enjoy. The scent of burnt rubber still haunts me. It's been 8 months since the accident on I-10 just outside New Orleans, but the smell follows me everywhere. Into my dreams, my shower, even into the cafeteria of Bayou Pines Psychiatric Hospital where I now work the graveyard shift. It wasn't my fault. That's what the police report said. That's what my therapist tells me every Tuesday at 3 p.m. But knowing something and believing it are entirely different creatures. My sister Ellie wasn't supposed to be in that car. She was supposed to be at her dorm at Tulane, studying for her biology midterm. Instead, she decided to surprise me for my birthday. I never saw her headlights coming around that bend when I swerved to avoid the coyote. The investigators said she died instantly when our cars collided, but the way her face looked through that shattered windshield told a different story. I couldn't stay in New Orleans after that. Every street corner, every restaurant, every damn streetcar reminded me of Ellie. Mom and Dad stopped calling. They never said they blamed me, but their silence was a verdict all its own. So I drove north, no destination in mind, just away from the memories. My savings wouldn't last forever, though. And after 3 weeks of aimless wandering, I found myself in St. Francisville, a town that seemed forgotten by time. Nestled along the Mississippi, about 30 miles north of Baton Rouge, St. Francisville was known for its plantation homes and not much else. The kind of place where everybody knew everybody, except me. I rented a small apartment above Magnolia Cafe on Ferdinand Street. The owner, Miss Jeanette, took pity on me. A hollow-eyed stranger with no references and a haunted look. She charged me half what the place was worth, and sometimes left gumbo outside my door on nights when I couldn't bring myself to eat. Finding work wasn't easy. My background in psychology meant I was overqualified for retail, but underqualified for clinical work without further credentials. Then I saw the ad pinned to the bulletin board at Feliciana Grocery. Night orderly needed. Bayou Pines Psychiatric Hospital. No experience necessary. Immediate start. The pay was better than I expected, almost suspiciously so. The HR manager, a thin woman named Mrs. Thibodeau, with eyeglasses that magnified her eyes to owlish proportions, barely glanced at my resume before sliding the contract across her desk. "Not many folks want the night shift," she said, her Cajun accent thick as molasses, especially not at Bayou Pines, "but you seem suitable." I didn't ask what she meant by that. I needed the money and the distraction. Bayou Pines itself was hidden away off Highway 61, down a winding road flanked by cypress trees dripping with Spanish moss. The building was older than it looked on the website, a sprawling Victorian-style structure that had clearly been renovated multiple times over the decades, each addition slightly mismatched with the original architecture. Behind it stretched the actual bayou, murky waters disappearing into the thick tree line. During orientation, my supervisor, Carlton Weber, a burly man with forearms like Christmas hams, handed me a typed list after showing me the security protocols, medication carts, and patient rooms. "These are the rules," he said flatly. "Follow them exactly, no exceptions." I laughed, thinking it was some kind of hazing ritual for the new guy. Carlton didn't smile back. "I'm serious, Michael. These aren't suggestions. They're not hospital policy that you can bend now and then. They're rules. Break them, and we can't guarantee your safety." I took the paper, skimming the list of oddly specific instructions. Some seemed reasonable, security measures and emergency protocols. Others were different. "This is a joke, right?" I asked, pointing to one particularly strange rule. Carlton's expression remained stone-cold serious. "First shift is tomorrow night, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Remember the rules. Your life depends on it." As I drove back to my apartment, the list burning a hole in my pocket, I wondered what exactly I'd gotten myself into. But the pay was good, and it's not like I had anything to lose. I was wrong about that. So very wrong. The list of rules sat on my kitchen table as I prepared for my first night shift. I'd read it a dozen times, each reading leaving me more confused than the last. I took a photo with my phone, just in case the paper somehow got lost. Some of the rules seemed rational enough, security protocols for a psychiatric facility. Others were disturbing. I arrived at Bayou Pines at 10:30 p.m., the gravel parking lot nearly empty except for a few staff vehicles. The building loomed against the night sky, most windows dark except for a few illuminated squares on the first floor. The humid Louisiana air clung to my skin as I walked toward the entrance, the chorus of cicadas and bullfrogs from the nearby swamp providing an eerie soundtrack. The night nurse, Beverly, a heavy-set woman with tired eyes and graying hair pulled into a severe bun, barely looked up from her computer as I swiped my newly issued ID card. "You the new orderly?" she asked, her voice raspy from decades of cigarettes. "Michael Broussard," I confirmed, signing the logbook. She handed me a set of keys and a walkie-talkie. "Carlton called in sick, said to tell you to stick to the list." She finally met my eyes. He meant it. My stomach tightened. Is there anything specific I should know that's not on the list? Beverly pursed her lips. "Just follow the damn rules, Cher. That's all any of us do." The hospital at night was a different creature than during orientation. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows down the long hallways. The green linoleum floors gleamed under the artificial light, worn thin in paths frequently traveled. The place smelled of industrial disinfectant, barely masking the underlying sense of human misery. I walked the halls, familiarizing myself with the layout. The patients were supposedly asleep, though occasional moans and mutters emerged from behind closed doors. The facility housed 48 patients across 2 floors, most suffering from severe psychiatric disorders resistant to conventional treatment. At precisely 11:15 p.m., I remembered the first rule on the list. Check room 204 at 11:15 p.m. Knock 3 times, wait 5 seconds, then enter. If the patient is in bed, log it and leave immediately. If the patient is standing, exit and lock the door from outside, then call extension 5118. Do not speak to the patient either way. I made my way to the second floor, anxiety building with each step. Room 204 belonged to a patient named Marcus Delacroix, according to the chart beside the door. Diagnosis: schizophrenia with religious delusions. I knocked 3 times, counting silently to 5, then turned the key. The room was dimly lit by a night light in the corner. Marcus lay in bed, blanket pulled to his chin, eyes closed. His breathing seemed regular, peaceful even. I quickly made a note on the clipboard hanging outside his door and left, locking it behind me. Back at the nurse's station, I checked the next rule. At midnight, go to the staff break room. Make exactly 1 cup of coffee in the blue mug, no other mug. Leave it on the table, then exit for exactly 15 minutes. When you return, pour the coffee down the sink regardless of whether it appears touched or not. That's just wasteful, I muttered to myself, but headed to the break room as midnight approached. The blue mug was where Carlton had showed me during orientation, on the top shelf of the cabinet, separate from the others. I made the coffee, black, and set it on the center of the table as instructed. Then I left, setting a timer on my phone for 15 minutes. When I returned, The coffee was still there, still steaming. Untouched, as far as I could tell. I poured it down the sink as instructed, watching the dark liquid swirl away. The night continued with its odd routines. At 1:30 a.m., I had to walk the perimeter of the building, checking that all exterior doors were locked, except the loading dock door, which the rules specifically stated must remain unlocked between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., despite no deliveries occurring at that hour. At 2:15 a.m., I was to go to the East Wing corridor and replace the bulb in the third light fixture, whether it was working or not. The old bulb had to be placed in a specific drawer in the maintenance room, wrapped in blue paper towels. By 3 a.m., I was starting to think Carlton and Beverly were hazing me, making the new guy perform meaningless tasks for their amusement. That's when I heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping coming from the direction of the administrative offices, which should have been empty. Rule number 7. If you hear tapping from the administrative wing between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., do not investigate. Turn on the radio in the nurse's station to WLFT 102.5 FM and increase the volume until you can no longer hear the tapping. Do not tune to any other station. The ancient radio sat on a shelf behind the desk. I turned it on, finding the station, a local one playing old-time Cajun music. The accordion-heavy Zydeco seemed absurdly cheerful in the sterile hospital hallways, but it masked the tapping, which had grown more insistent. I continued my rounds, each one marked by another peculiar instruction from the list. By the time 5 a.m. arrived, I'd counted 15 rules, each one seemingly more arbitrary than the last. But I followed every one of them. Because something in Carlton's eyes, in Beverly's cautious glances, told me these weren't jokes or superstitions. These were survival tactics. I survived my first night. Barely. The drive home in the pale dawn light felt surreal. Spanish moss hung from the cypress trees along Highway 61 like ghostly curtains. My mind kept returning to the events of the night, the bizarre tasks, the unsettling atmosphere, the way the patient's cries sometimes synchronized with the strange tapping from the administrative wing. I stumbled into my apartment above Magnolia Cafe and collapsed onto my bed, still in my scrubs. Despite my exhaustion, sleep evaded me for hours. The rules played on repeat behind my closed eyelids. When I finally woke, the sun was already setting. I groaned and checked my phone. 6:37 p.m. 4 texts from an unknown number. All from Carlton. You made it through. Good. Rules 9 to 12 will be important tonight. Pay special attention. Did you throw away the old light bulb like instructed? Confirm you got these messages. I texted back a simple yes, then dragged myself to the shower. As I stood under the lukewarm spray, I tried to recall rules 9 through 12. Something about the third-floor janitor's closet and not answering if I hear my name being called between certain hours. Miss Jeanette had left a container of jambalaya outside my door. I wolfed it down while reviewing the list, committing each rule to memory. Tonight, I wouldn't be caught off guard. The hospital parking lot had more cars when I arrived. Day shift leaving, night shift arriving. A group of nurses huddled near the entrance, smoking and laughing. They fell silent as I approached, their eyes following me like I was a curiosity in a museum. Carlton waited at the time clock, arms crossed over his broad chest. The fluorescent lights emphasized the dark circles under his eyes, the unhealthy pallor of his skin. You followed all the rules? He asked without preamble. To the letter, I confirmed. Good. He nodded, relief evident in his hunched shoulders. Some shifts are worse than others. Last night was a calm one. A chill crept up my spine. What happens on bad nights? Carlton didn't answer immediately. He glanced at the security camera in the corner of the room, then motioned for me to follow him outside. We stood by the employee entrance, the heavy bayou air settling around us, thick with mosquitoes. 5 years ago, he said, voice low. We had an orderly named James Mouton. Good guy, ex-military, thought the rules were... Carlton made air quotes. Some voodoo bullshit. He pulled out a pack of cigarettes, offered me one. I declined. James was working a Thursday night in July. Hot as hell, everyone on edge. He decided some of the rules were a waste of time. Carlton lit his cigarette, the ember glowing orange in the gathering darkness. He skipped checking room 204, didn't make the coffee, ignored the tapping. What happened? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Third night of his shift, security cameras caught him talking to someone in the East Wing corridor at 3:27 a.m. Nobody else was visible on the footage. Carlton took a long drag. By 3:45, the cameras in that section went dead. We found pieces of them the next morning, scattered from the East Wing to the loading dock. Jesus. My mouth went dry. You're serious? Police reports said animal attack. Probably gators from the bayou, they figured. He gave a humorless laugh. But gators don't usually drag a man through locked doors, do they? And they don't usually leave messages on the walls. Before I could ask what messages, Carlton's walkie-talkie crackled. Carlton to the front desk, please. Carlton to the front desk. He flicked his cigarette into the gravel. Follow the rules, Michael. All of them. Even the ones that seem pointless. Especially those. The night shift began like the previous one. I checked room 204 at precisely 11:15 p.m. Marcus was in bed again, seemingly asleep. I made the notation and left quickly. At 11:45 p.m., I followed rule number 9. Check the third-floor janitor's closet. The door must remain exactly half open between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. If it's fully closed, open it halfway, but do not look inside while doing so. If it's fully open, close it halfway, but do not touch any cleaning supplies. The third floor housed the intensive care unit, patients with severe conditions requiring more constant monitoring. It was quieter than the other floors, the silence heavy and expectant. The janitor's closet was at the end of the north corridor, across from the staff elevator. The door was fully open when I arrived. I kept my eyes averted as instructed and pulled it halfway closed. As I did, I felt a whisper of movement from inside, the faintest disturbance of air against my hand. I hurried back to the second floor, trying to convince myself it was just a draft. At midnight, I made the coffee in the blue mug and left it in the break room. When I returned 15 minutes later, something had changed. The coffee was still there, still steaming, but the mug had been moved from the center of the table to the edge. Rule number 10. If any item you've placed according to the rules has been moved, but not consumed, taken, return it to its original position and recite the Lord's Prayer before leaving. I'd grown up Catholic, though I hadn't set foot in a church since Ellie's funeral. The prayer came back automatically as I carefully returned the mug to the center of the table. Our Father, who art in heaven. By 2 a.m., the hospital had settled into its nighttime rhythm, the occasional moan from a patient, the hum of the ancient air conditioning, the squeak of my shoes on the linoleum. I was in the middle of logging vitals for the second-floor patients when the lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. Rule number 11. If the lights flicker between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., immediately go to the basement electrical room. Check that the red switch on panel C is in the up position. Do not touch any other switches regardless of their position. Leave a tally mark on the clipboard hanging beside the panel. The basement was arguably the worst part of Bayou Pines. During orientation, Carlton had mentioned it was the oldest section of the hospital, dating back to the 1920s when the facility had first opened as a tuberculosis sanatorium. The walls were raw brick, the floor uneven concrete. Pipes ran along the low ceiling, dripping condensation. The electrical room was behind a heavy metal door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Inside, the walls were lined with breaker panels, each labeled with faded yellowing cards. Panel C was on the far wall. The red switch was indeed in the up position, as it should be. I picked up the pen hanging from the clipboard and added a tally mark to the sheet. There were hundreds of marks already, clustered in groups, some in neat, precise lines, others shaky, as if drawn by a trembling hand. As I turned to leave, I noticed something scratched into the concrete wall beside the door, crude letters gouged into the surface. "They come through the lights." I exited quickly, locking the door behind me. The basement corridor stretched before me, dark except for the emergency lights casting pools of sickly yellow illumination every 20 feet or so. I was halfway to the stairs when I heard it. Someone calling my name. "Michael." The voice was soft, feminine, vaguely familiar. It echoed from the darkened corridor to my right, which led to the old hydrotherapy rooms, long since abandoned. Rule number 12. If you hear your name called between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., do not respond or investigate. Return to the main floor immediately and burn exactly 1 stick of the white sage kept in the top drawer of the nurse's station. I turned toward the stairs, ignoring the voice. It called again, louder this time. "Michael, please help me." My blood froze in my veins. It was Ellie's voice. "You left me there, Michael. You left me to die." I knew it couldn't be her. Ellie was dead, her body buried in Lafayette Cemetery back in New Orleans. This was some trick, some product of my guilt-ridden mind exacerbated by fatigue and the hospital's oppressive atmosphere. "Don't you want to see me, Michael?" I ran up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, the voice fading behind me. When I reached the nurse's station, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely open the drawer to find the sage. Beverly looked up from her paperwork, her face expressionless. "You heard it," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, fumbling with the lighter Carlton had shown me during orientation, specifically used for this purpose. "We all hear someone eventually," Beverly said, turning back to her charts. "The hospital knows what hurts us most." By my 3rd night at Bayou Pines, I had established a routine, if you could call following a list of bizarre rules a routine. I arrived early, reviewed the patient logs from the day shift, and mentally rehearsed the rules before beginning my rounds. Carlton was back on duty, looking marginally better than the night before. He greeted me with a nod as I clocked in. "Any changes to the rules I should know about?" I asked. "Check your email. Rule number 18 has been modified." His voice was tight. "A new patient arrived in room 219 yesterday. Adeline Robichaud, 67, advanced dementia with violent episodes. She's under special observation." I pulled up my hospital email on my phone. The message from administration was brief. Rule number 18 modification. When checking rooms 217 to 222 at 4 a.m., bring the St. Benedict medal from the chapel. Hold it in your left hand. If patient in room 219 asks you for the time, tell her only that it's not time yet. Do not enter her room under any circumstances between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., regardless of noises heard within. "What's her story?" I asked, pocketing my phone. Carlton rubbed his beard stubble. "She was found wandering in Tunica Hills 3 weeks ago, covered in blood. Not hers." He lowered his voice. "The police found her husband in their home outside St. Francisville. What was left of him anyway. They think she did it during the dementia episode." Jesus. "And we're treating her here instead of a secure criminal facility because Judge Fontenot ordered a psychiatric evaluation before trial. She's Martin Fontenot's second cousin or something." Carlton shrugged. You know how it is in these small towns. Everyone's connected. The shift began normally, or as normally as it could in Bayou Pines. I checked room 204 at 11:15 p.m. Marcus was in bed again, sleeping peacefully. Made the coffee at midnight. Checked that the janitor's closet door was half open. Around 1 a.m., I was organizing medication carts for morning distribution when Dr. Landon Hughes, the overnight psychiatrist, approached the nurse's station. I'd seen him only briefly during my previous shifts. He was a tall, gaunt man with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses. His white coat was impeccably pressed despite the late hour. "Mr. Broussard, isn't it?" He extended his hand. His fingers were cold and bony when I shook them. "How are you finding your position with us?" "It's interesting," I said diplomatically. Dr. Hughes smiled thinly. "I understand Carlton has shared our special protocols with you." "The rules, yes." He leaned against the counter, studying me with pale blue eyes that seemed almost colorless under the fluorescent lights. "What do you make of them?" I hesitated, unsure how to respond. Was this some kind of test? "They seem necessary for maintaining security in the facility." "Indeed." Dr. Hughes nodded, apparently satisfied. "Some of our patients have unique conditions. Conventional psychiatric approaches aren't always sufficient." He tapped his fingers rhythmically on the counter. "Are you familiar with the concept of liminal spaces, Mr. Broussard?" "Threshold spaces," I said, drawing on my undergraduate psychology courses. "Areas of transition." "Very good. Night itself is liminal, the threshold between one day and the next, and psychiatric hospitals occupy a liminal space in society, housing those who exist between conventional reality and something else entirely." He glanced at his watch. "You should proceed with rule number 13 now. It's nearly time." Rule number 13. At 1:30 a.m., go to the water fountain near the east wing bathroom. Fill a paper cup exactly halfway. Pour the water in a circle around the drain of the bathroom sink. Leave the empty cup on the right side of the sink. Do not look in the mirror while in the bathroom." "Of course," I said, standing. "If you'll excuse me." Dr. Hughes nodded, watching me intently as I left. I could feel his eyes on my back until I turned the corner. The East Wing bathroom was small, with a single sink and toilet stall. The fluorescent light buzzed and flickered overhead. I deliberately kept my eyes away from the mirror as I entered. I filled the paper cup at the water fountain outside, then returned to pour it in a circle around the drain as instructed. As the water swirled down, I heard a faint sound coming from the pipes, a soft, rhythmic tapping, almost like fingers drumming against metal. I placed the empty cup on the right side of the sink and turned to leave, still avoiding the mirror. But as I reached for the door handle, the light above me died. Complete darkness enveloped the small bathroom. The tapping in the pipes grew louder, more insistent. Then the worst thing happened. I felt a cold draft against the back of my neck, as if someone had just exhaled directly against my skin. Rule number 21. If the lights go out while you're performing any task, remain still. Count to 30. If the lights don't return, recite Psalm 23 out loud and proceed to the nearest exit walking backward. Do not run. I began counting silently, heart hammering in my chest. 1, 2, 3. The tapping increased in tempo. 4, 5, 6. Something brushed against my arm in the darkness. Light as a feather. Cold as ice. 7, 8, 9. The smell hit me next. A sickly sweet odor of decay like roadkill baking in the Louisiana sun. 10, 11, 12. My nerves screamed at me to run, but Carlton's warnings kept me rooted in place. 13, 14, 15. The sound of liquid dripping joined the tapping, slow, viscous drops hitting the tile floor. 16, 17, 18. My counting faltered as I felt something wet touch my shoe. 19. 20. The lights flickered back on. I stood frozen, eyes fixed on the door. The bathroom appeared exactly as before. Clean, sterile, ordinary. The tapping had stopped. The foul smell was gone. I glanced down at my shoe, expecting to see something unpleasant, but there was nothing. I exhaled shakily and left, careful not to look at the mirror on my way out. Dr. Hughes was gone when I returned to the nurse's station. Beverly sat in his place, filling out charts with mechanical efficiency. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she remarked without looking up. "I don't know what I saw," I admitted, sinking into a chair. "Or didn't see." Beverly's pen paused mid-word. "Rule number 13. When I nodded, she continued writing. "That bathroom's always been trouble. Old Agatha Jenkins hanged herself there in 73. She was a nurse here, worked with the tuberculosis patients before the hospital was converted. Great history lesson," I muttered. "You asked for this job," Beverly reminded me, her tone unsympathetic. The night dragged on. At 2:15 a.m., I replaced the bulb in the East Wing corridor as required. At 3 a.m., the tapping began from the administrative offices, and I turned on the Cajun radio station to drown it out. By 3:45 a.m., I was fighting exhaustion. The hospital's nighttime noises had become a surreal symphony. The hum of medical equipment, the occasional cry from a patient's room, the constant drip of a leaky pipe somewhere in the ceiling. I made my way to the chapel to retrieve the St. Benedict medal from my 4 a.m. checks. The chapel was small, tucked away on the first floor near the garden entrance. Stained glass windows depicted scenes I didn't recognize. Figures in antiquated medical garb tending to the sick. Strange symbols interspersed among more traditional Christian imagery. The medal hung on a hook beside a statue of the Virgin Mary. It was larger than I expected, about the size of a $50 coin, tarnished with age. I slipped it into my left pocket and headed upstairs. Rooms 217 to 222 were in the west wing of the second floor. I checked them in sequence: 217, 218, 220, 221, and 222. All patients were accounted for and sleeping. I saved room 219, Adeline Robichaud's room, for last. As I approached, I transferred the medal to my left hand as instructed. The door was closed, the small observation window dark. I leaned close, listening. Silence. Just as I was about to move on, a soft voice came from within. "Is someone there?" The voice was elderly, feminine, with a thick Cajun accent. "What time is it, Cher?" I froze, recalling the modified rule. "It's not time yet," I responded through the door. Silence followed. Then a sound like nails dragging slowly across the door's inside surface. "You're not Ellie," the voice said, suddenly different, younger, sharper. "Where's Ellie?" "She promised to come back." My blood turned to ice. How could this woman know about my sister? "I know what you did, Michael," the voice continued, dropping to a whisper. "I know what happened on the I-10. It wasn't the coyote, was it? You were texting her. That's why you didn't see her car." A lie. It had to be. The police report confirmed the coyote. There were witnesses who saw it dart across the highway. "I can smell your guilt," the voice hissed, now pressed against the door's edge. "It smells like burnt rubber and blood, like Ellie when they cut her from the wreckage." I backed away, the metal clutched tightly in my hand. The metal grew hot, nearly burning my palm. "Rule violation in progress," announced the overhead PA system suddenly, making me jump. "East Wing, third floor. Rule violation in progress." Carlton's voice burst from my walkie-talkie. "Michael, leave 219 immediately and report to the 3rd floor. We have a situation." I hurried toward the stairwell, the voice from room 219 following me with laughter that sounded like breaking glass. The 3rd floor was in chaos when I arrived. 2 security guards stood outside the ICU entrance, their faces grim. Carlton paced nearby, radioing instructions to someone. "What happened?" I gasped, out of breath from taking the stairs. "Melissa," Carlton said, referring to another night orderly I'd briefly met during orientation. "She broke rule number 9, closed the janitor's closet all the way and locked it." "Why would she do that?" "She said she heard a child crying inside." Carlton's expression was bleak. "There are no pediatric patients at Bayou Pines." Before I could respond, the lights throughout the corridor flickered violently. The security guards tensed, hands moving to their tasers. "It's coming," one of them muttered. A scream erupted from behind the ICU doors, raw, primal, filled with terror. Melissa's scream. "What's happening to her?" I demanded. "We have to help." Carlton grabbed my arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. "We can't go in there. Not now. Rule number 23. If another staff member breaks a rule, do not interfere with the consequences. Return to your assigned area and perform all subsequent rules with doubled attention to detail." "That's insane," I protested, trying to pull away. "She could be hurt." "She's already gone," Carlton said, his voice hollow. "The rules exist for a reason, Michael. Break them, and the hospital takes what it's owed." The screaming stopped abruptly. The lights stabilized. The security guards relaxed slightly. "Return to the 2nd floor," Carlton ordered. "Continue your rounds. I'll handle this. But now, Michael, before something notices you're not where you're supposed to be." I reluctantly headed back downstairs, the saint. Benedict medal still clenched in my sweating palm. As I passed room 219, all was quiet inside. But I could have sworn I heard soft, mocking laughter following me down the hall. The remainder of my shift passed in a fog of anxiety. The incident with Melissa hung over the hospital like a shroud. The security guards avoided eye contact when I passed them. Beverly's usually impassive face showed cracks of emotion, fear, resignation. I followed the rules with manic precision, checking room 204, making the coffee, monitoring the janitor's closet. By the time 7 a.m. arrived, bringing with it the gray light of dawn and the bustle of the day shift, I was a raw nerve. Carlton intercepted me in the parking lot as I was leaving. His eyes were bloodshot, his uniform rumpled. He held out a paper cup of coffee from the staff room. Not the blue mug. This was different. "You can drink this one," he said with a weak attempt at humor. I accepted it, the warmth seeping into my cold fingers. What happened to Melissa? Carlton's gaze slid away. Official report says she had a psychotic break, attacked herself with a pair of scissors from the nurse's station, gouged her own eyes out. That's not possible. She was locked in the ICU corridor. That's the official report, he repeated with emphasis. She's been transferred to University Medical Center in Baton Rouge. Probably won't make it. I felt sick. And the truth? Carlton sighed, shoulders slumping. The truth won't help you do your job, Michael. I think I deserve to know what I'm risking my life for every night. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded toward his truck. Not here. We drove in silence, heading away from the hospital down the winding Bayou Road. The morning was heavy with moisture, fog rising from the murky waters. Carlton pulled into the gravel lot of Guidry's General Store, a weathered building that served as gas station, bait shop, and grocery for this remote stretch of parish. The proprietor, an elderly man with skin like tanned leather, nodded at Carlton but didn't comment as we bought coffee and moved to a small table in the back. The place was empty, except for us. Bayou Pines wasn't always a psychiatric hospital, Carlton began, stirring sugar into his coffee. It started as a tuberculosis sanatorium in the 1920s. Lots of people died there. The treatments back then were basically torture. Cold baths, experimental surgeries. He pulled out his phone, swiped through a few images, then showed me a black and white photograph of the hospital in its early days. The architecture was the same, but the surroundings were different. No paved roads, just wilderness. In 1937, they had an incident. Some patients developed symptoms that weren't consistent with TB. Violent behavior, speaking in tongues, self-harm. The medical director at the time, Dr. Augustine Verin, claimed they were possessed. I raised an eyebrow. Possessed? This was rural Louisiana in the 30s. People still believed in that sort of thing. Still do in some parts. Carlton swiped to another photo. A stern-looking man in wire-rimmed glasses and a white coat, surrounded by staff. That's Verin. He was involved in some questionable research, trying to find physical evidence of the soul. The state medical board was investigating him when the incident happened. What exactly occurred? According to the official records, a fire broke out in the East Wing, killed 27 patients and 5 staff, but newspaper accounts from the time tell a different story. They mention patients killing each other and themselves in bizarre ways. One orderly was found hanging upside down from the chapel ceiling, symbols carved into his skin. I approached the cafe's dining area cautiously. A figure sat in the corner booth, hunched over a coffee cup. Dark hair obscured her face. She wore scrubs, the same green uniform as Bayou Pines staff. "Melissa?" I called, keeping my distance. She looked up slowly. I stifled a gasp. It was Melissa's face, but something was wrong with her eyes. They weren't gouged out as Carlton had described, but they weren't normal either. The irises were an unnatural shade of yellow, the pupils vertical slits like a cat's. "Michael Broussard," she said, her voice oddly flat. "You weren't where you should have been last night. You didn't follow all the rules." I glanced at Miss Jeanette, who had returned to the kitchen, then back at the thing wearing Melissa's face. "What are you?" "Just a messenger. A courtesy, really." The creature sipped the coffee. "We want you to succeed, Michael. We need good orderlies at Bayou Pines, people who follow rules." What happened to the real Melissa? She's fulfilling a different role now. Not Melissa smiled, revealing teeth that seemed too numerous, too sharp. "Tonight is important. The anniversary. Pay special attention to rule number 27. There is no rule number 27 on my list. There will be." She stood, leaving the coffee untouched. "We've taken an interest in you, Michael. We rarely do that. Most humans are forgettable." As she passed me, she pressed something into my palm, cold, metallic. I looked down to see the St. Benedict medal I'd used the night before. I'd returned it to the chapel before leaving my shift. "How did you—" But when I looked up, the cafe was empty. Miss Jeanette hummed in the kitchen, the sound of her chopping vegetables a counterpoint to the racing of my heart. I stumbled upstairs to my apartment, double-locking the door behind me. On my bedside table sat my list of rules. At the bottom, in spidery handwriting I didn't recognize, a new entry had appeared, Rule number 27. When the clock strikes 3:33 a.m. on the anniversary, go to the chapel alone. Bring nothing. Say nothing. Wait for further instructions. Outside my window, a mockingbird sang in the afternoon sun, oblivious to the cold dread spreading through my bones. Sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Melissa's face with those inhuman yellow eyes. I saw Ellie through the shattered windshield. I saw the words scratched into the basement wall. They come through the lights. By the time my alarm went off at 9 p.m., I had made a decision. I wasn't going back to Bayou Pines. Whatever was happening there, whatever had taken an interest in me, I wanted no part of it. I would pack my meager belongings, get in my car, and drive. Maybe head west to Texas, or north to Arkansas, somewhere far from Louisiana and its ghosts. I was throwing clothes into my duffel bag when my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Michael? It was Dr. Hughes, his voice crisp and professional. I trust you're preparing for your shift tonight. I hesitated. Actually, I don't think I'll be coming in. I'm not feeling well. That would be ill-advised, he said, his tone hardening slightly. Especially tonight of all nights. The anniversary requires all hands on deck, as they say. I'm sorry, but did you receive rule number 27 yet? He interrupted. My blood ran cold. How did he know about that? I don't know what you're talking about. Michael, Dr. Hughes sighed. Dishonesty doesn't become you. We both know what happened at Magnolia Cafe today. Melissa, or rather, what visited you wearing Melissa's appearance, delivered an important message. Rule number 27 is not optional. Are you threatening me? No, I'm educating you. The rules protect everyone, staff, patients, even the outside world. When they're broken, there are consequences. But some rules, when followed properly, offer opportunities. What kind of opportunities? Come to your shift tonight and find out. The line went dead. I stared at my half-packed bag, indecision gripping me. Part of me screamed to leave, to get as far from St. Francisville as possible. But another part, the part that had driven me north after Ellie's death, searching for something I couldn't name, was morbidly curious. And beneath it all was the nagging suspicion that I couldn't escape even if I tried. As Carlton had said, some patients were drawn to Bayou Pines like metal filings to a magnet. What if I was now caught in that same pull? I arrived at the hospital just before 11 p.m. The air felt different, charged, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. Security was tighter than usual. 2 guards stood at the entrance, checking IDs meticulously. Additional cameras had been installed in the hallways overnight. The briefing room was crowded. All night staff had been called in, including people I'd never seen before. Carlton stood at the front, his expression grim. Tonight marks the anniversary of the 1937 incident. He began without preamble. For those of you who are new, that means heightened activity throughout the facility. All standard rules remain in effect, plus the anniversary protocols you've received. His eyes found mine briefly before continuing. Buddy system all night. No one moves through the building alone, except, he paused, for designated staff with specific anniversary duties. Dr. Hughes entered as Carlton finished speaking. He wore his usual white coat, but a strange medallion hung from a chain around his neck, an intricate design of interlocking circles and triangles. Good evening, he addressed the room. I trust you've all reviewed your special instructions for tonight. Remember, precision is essential. Time synchronization is crucial. He tapped his watch, and everyone in the room checked their own timepieces, adjusting them to match. I did the same, setting my watch to exactly 11:07 p.m. The window opens at 3:33 a.m. and remains accessible for exactly 7 minutes. Dr. Hughes continued. Those with designated tasks must be in position before then. Questions? No one spoke. The tension in the room was palpable. As we filed out to begin our shifts, Beverly gripped my arm. Be careful tonight, she whispered, The anniversary is when they're strongest, when they test the boundaries." "Who are they?" I asked, but she just shook her head and walked away. The night began with the usual routines, but everything felt off-kilter. The lights seemed dimmer. The air tasted metallic. The patients were unusually quiet, as if holding their breath collectively. At 11:15, I checked room 204. For the first time, Marcus wasn't in bed. He stood by the window, staring out at the bayou, his back to me. I remembered the rule. If the patient is standing, exit and lock the door from outside, then call extension 5118. I backed out slowly, locked the door, and called the extension from the hallway phone. A raspy voice answered on the first ring. "Location? Room 204. Patient Marcus Delacroix is standing. Acknowledged. Do not return to that room tonight." The midnight coffee ritual felt different too. When I returned to the break room after leaving the Blue Mug, the coffee wasn't just moved. It was gone entirely, the mug upside down on the table. Rule number 10 specified what to do if the item was moved, but not consumed. There was nothing about what to do if it was gone. I hesitated, then flipped the mug right side up and recited the Lord's Prayer anyway before leaving. By 2 a.m., the hospital had descended into a strange hush. The usual ambient noises, the hum of equipment, the occasional patient moan, the creaking of the old building, had all stopped. The silence was absolute, oppressive. The lights flickered as they often did between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. I dutifully went to check the basement electrical room. The red switch on panel C was in the up position, but something had changed. The tally sheet was gone, replaced by a single sheet of yellowed paper with spidery handwriting. The waiting is almost over. I added my tally mark directly on the wall instead, and left quickly. As 3 a.m. approached, the air grew heavier, harder to breathe. The tapping from the administrative wing was absent tonight. Instead, a low, barely audible hum emanated from everywhere and nowhere at once. At 3:15 a.m., Carlton found me outside room 219. Adeline Robichaux had been oddly silent all night. "It's almost time," he said quietly. "Rule number 27. You know about that?" He nodded. "I have my own version. Different location, different instructions. Dr. Hughes has been preparing for this anniversary for months." What exactly happens at 3:33? Carlton checked that we were alone in the hallway. The hospital shifts. The boundaries between here and there become almost non-existent for 7 minutes. It's when they can cross over most easily, but it's also when we have the most direct access to them. And what does Dr. Hughes want with them? Information, power, the usual things men like him crave. Carlton's voice was bitter. He thinks he can control what comes through, use it somehow. He's been experimenting for years. Like Dr. Verret in 1937. Exactly like that. And we know how that ended. He gripped my shoulder. "Be careful in the chapel, Michael. Whatever they offer you, remember that everything has a price." At 3:30 a.m., I made my way to the chapel on the first floor. The hallways felt elongated, distances stretched like taffy. The few staff I passed moved as if underwater, their faces blurred and unrecognizable. The chapel was dark when I entered, illuminated only by red emergency lights and a few votive candles near the altar. The stained glass windows glowed faintly, though there was no external light source to illuminate them. I stood alone in the center of the room, watching the seconds tick by on my watch. 3:31, 3:32. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the candles extinguished simultaneously. The red emergency lights flickered twice, then stabilized, casting the chapel in a bloody glow. The air pressure changed abruptly, my ears popping painfully. The stained glass windows began to glow brighter, the strange symbols among the religious imagery pulsing with inner light. The images themselves seemed to move subtly, figures turning their heads, hands reaching toward the glass. Michael Broussard. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, neither male nor female, but somehow both. You have come as instructed. I have, I managed, my mouth desert dry. Do you know why you were drawn to Bayou Pines? No. A sound like distant laughter rippled through the chapel. Lies are transparent here, in this moment between moments. You came seeking absolution. For Ellie. The name hung in the air like smoke. I didn't kill her, I whispered. Didn't you? 3 seconds. That's how long you looked at your phone to read her text. Almost there. Happy birthday, big brother. 3 seconds during which your car drifted just enough to require a sudden correction when you saw the coyote. My legs trembled. I'd never told anyone about the text. I'd deleted it immediately after the accident, consumed by guilt. What do you want from me? A conduit, the voice answered. A willing participant. The rules bind us, limit our influence, but a volunteer that opens possibilities. Volunteer for what? To remember, to witness, to serve as a bridge. The air in front of me shimmered, coalescing into a vaguely human shape, transparent, shifting, impossible to focus on directly. Step forward, Michael. Accept your role. We can give you what you desire most. As if on cue, another figure appeared beside the first, smaller, more defined. A young woman with curly brown hair and a familiar smile. Ellie? My voice cracked. She looked exactly as she had the day before the accident. Vibrant, alive, her eyes sparkling with the intelligence that had earned her a full scholarship to Tulane. Michael. Her voice was just as I remembered it. I've missed you. I stepped forward involuntarily, hand outstretched. How is this possible? The veil is thin tonight, the first voice explained. Thin enough for brief reunions, or more permanent arrangements if you're willing. What do you mean? Join us as a conduit, and you can be with Ellie again. Not just tonight, but whenever the conditions allow. All you need to do is invite us in. Ellie smiled encouragingly. It doesn't hurt, Michael, and I'm so lonely here without you. Something wasn't right. The Ellie I knew would never ask me to put myself in danger, no matter how lonely she was. This was a manipulation, using my guilt and grief against me. You're not Ellie, I said, withdrawing my outstretched hand. My sister would never ask me to do this. The Ellie figure's expression changed, something inhuman flashing across her features. Don't you want forgiveness, Michael? Don't you want to make amends? Not like this, I said firmly. Not by letting something wear her face. The first figure drifted closer. You cannot leave now. The rules of rule number 27 are clear. Once entered, the covenant must be completed. I didn't agree to any covenant. Your presence here is agreement enough. The temperature in the chapel plummeted suddenly. My breath fogged in front of me. The figures began to change, their human appearances melting away to reveal something else. Shapes that hurt my eyes to look at directly. Geometries that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. If not a conduit, the voice said, now harsh and grating, then a vessel. They lunged toward me simultaneously. I stumbled backward, falling against the altar. My hand closed around something cold and metallic, the saint, Benedict metal that Melissa had returned to me. I held it up instinctively, and the advancing figures recoiled. The metal burned hot in my palm, glowing with the same inner light as the stained glass. You came prepared, the voice hissed. Clever, but medals and prayers are temporary barriers at best. We are patient. We will wait. The chapel door burst open. Dr. Hughes stood in the entrance, the strange medallion around his neck pulsing with light. Behind him stood Carlton and 2 security guards, all holding similar protective items. A crucifix, another medal, what looked like a small leather pouch. "That's enough, Doctor," Hughes commanded. "The exchange was not completed. You have no claim on him." The figures writhed angrily, their forms stretching and contracting in nauseating ways. "The hour is not complete, Landon Hughes," they snarled in unison. "You have no authority here." "I have exactly the authority prescribed by the original covenant." Dr. Hughes stepped forward confidently. "Now return to your domain until properly summoned." The figures shrank back, their forms dissolving into misty tendrils that seeped into the walls, the floor, the very air. The Ellie figure was the last to fade, her face reforming one final time to look at me with an expression of profound sadness. "You could have saved me," she whispered in a voice that sounded achingly like my sister's, before disappearing entirely. The chapel returned to normal. The stained glass windows went dark. The air pressure equalized with a pop. My watch showed 3:38 a.m. Just 5 minutes had passed, though it felt like hours. Dr. Hughes approached me, his face a mask of controlled anger. "You were supposed to accept their offer, Mr. Broussard. That was the point of rule number 27. You wanted me to become their conduit? It was a controlled exchange, a specific entity, under specific conditions." He glared at Carlton. "Someone interfered with the preparations. Someone gave you protection you weren't supposed to have." Carlton's expression remained neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about, Doctor." Dr. Hughes straightened his lab coat, composing himself. "It doesn't matter. There will be other opportunities, other candidates." He fixed his cold gaze on me. "You still have work to do tonight, Mr. Broussard. I suggest you return to your duties." He left, followed by the security guards. Only Carlton remained, watching me with an unreadable expression. "What just happened?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You passed the test," he said simply. "One that most fail. And if I had agreed, become their conduit?" Carlton's face darkened. "Then you'd have ended up like Marcus in room 204, a shell housing something else entirely." The remainder of the anniversary night passed in eerie calm. After the confrontation in the chapel, the hospital seemed to exhale, tension draining from its walls like a receding tide. The patients slept. The usual noises, the creaking pipes, the humming equipment, returned. By the time dawn arrived, it almost felt like a normal psychiatric facility again. Almost. I clocked out at 7 a.m., exhausted beyond words. As I crossed the parking lot to my car, Beverly fell into step beside me. She looked as drained as I felt, the lines around her eyes deeper than usual. "You survived," she said, lighting a cigarette with trembling fingers. "Barely." She studied me through a cloud of smoke. "You went to the chapel, rule number 27. You knew about that? Everyone with more than 5 years at Bayou Pines gets a rule number 27 on anniversaries. Different locations, different instructions." She took a long drag. "I was in the basement morgue." I stopped walking. "There's a morgue in the basement?" "From the sanatorium days. They've sealed it off, but it's still there." She flicked ash onto the gravel. "Dr. Hughes has been testing the boundaries for years, seeing how much contact we can have with them without consequences. And you go along with this?" Beverly's laugh was hollow. "You think any of us have a choice? Once you're part of Bayou Pines, you're part of it forever, one way or another. She nodded at my car. Go home, Michael. Get some rest. The anniversary's over, but the echoes linger for days. I drove back to St. Francisville in a daze, the rising sun painting the Spanish moss in shades of gold and amber. The bayou waters reflected the morning light, deceptively peaceful. I should have felt relief that the night was over, but something nagged at me, a sense of unfinished business. Miss Jeanette waved as I trudged up the stairs to my apartment. Rough night, Cher? You look like you've seen a ghost. I managed a weak smile. Something like that. There's fresh coffee if you want some, and I made Payne Perdue. The thought of food made my stomach turn, but I thanked her anyway. Inside my apartment, I collapsed onto the bed without bothering to undress. Sleep came instantly, dragging me down into darkness. I dreamed of Ellie, not the apparition from the chapel, but my real sister. We were sitting on the levee in New Orleans, watching the Mississippi River flow past, as we'd done countless times growing up. You know it wasn't your fault, she said, skipping stones across the water's surface. I looked at my phone. 3 seconds. And I shouldn't have surprised you. I should have told you I was coming. She turned to me, her expression serious. But that's not why you're at Bayou Pines, Michael. Then why? Because some places call the broken people. They can slip through more easily. She stood, brushing dirt from her jeans. You need to find the others. What others? The ones who survived rule number 27. The ones who said no. I woke with a jolt. Late afternoon sunlight streaming through my window. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Carlton and a text. We need to talk. It's not over. I showered, trying to wash away the remnants of the night, then walked down to Magnolia Cafe. The place was half full with the dinner crowd, locals mostly, with a few tourists who'd ventured off the main highway to see St. Francisville's historic district. Miss Jeanette brought me a plate of red beans and rice without asking, along with sweet tea in a mason jar. You need to eat, you, she chided. Too skinny already. I managed a few bites, my appetite returning as my body remembered it needed fuel. As I ate, I noticed a man at the counter watching me, middle-aged, heavy-set, with a salt and pepper beard and the weathered look of someone who worked outdoors. When he realized I'd spotted him, he picked up his coffee and came to my table. Mind if I join you? I gestured to the empty chair across from me. Do I know you? No, but I know about you. He set down his cup and extended his hand. Thomas Guidry. I own Guidry's General Store out by the bayou. I shook his hand, remembering the store where Carlton had taken me. Michael Broussard. I know. Night orderly at Bayou Pines. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Carlton told me about last night. About what happened in the chapel. I glanced around to make sure no one was listening. Why would he tell you that? Because I used to work there too, 15 years ago. Security guard. He rolled up his sleeve to reveal a strange scar on his forearm, a pattern of interlocking circles and triangles, similar to the medallion Dr. Hughes had worn. I had my own rule number 27, in the old hydrotherapy rooms. And you said no? He nodded grimly. One of the few who did. There aren't many of us. Us? Those who've been to the edge and pulled back. Those who know what Bayou Pines really is. He pulled a napkin toward him and wrote an address. Come to this place tonight at 8 p.m. There are people you should meet. After Thomas left, I finished my meal and called Carlton. He answered on the first ring. Did Thomas find you? Yeah. He mentioned a meeting tonight. Carlton exhaled in relief. Good. After what happened in the chapel, you need to understand what you're dealing with. I could just quit. Walk away from Bayou Pines. You could try. His tone made it clear he thought otherwise. Just go to the meeting. After that, make your decision. The address Thomas had given me led to an old Masonic lodge on the outskirts of town, a simple brick building with columns flanking the entrance. I arrived at 7:55 p.m. to find a small gathering of cars in the gravel lot, including Carlton's pickup truck. Inside, about a dozen people sat in a rough circle on folding chairs. I recognized some of them. Beverly, the night nurse, Thomas Guidry, a security guard whose name I couldn't recall. Others were strangers to me. Carlton motioned me to an empty chair. Everyone, this is Michael Broussard, new night orderly. Survived his rule number 27 last night. Nods of acknowledgement rippled through the group. An elderly woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun studied me intently. You're the one who saw his sister? How did you? Word travels, she interrupted. I'm Doctor Margaret Fontenot. I was the medical director at Bayou Pines before Dr. Hughes, before I realized what he was really doing there. And what exactly is that? I asked. Dr. Fontenot exchanged glances with Carlton. Landon Hughes believes he's discovered a way to harness what comes through the thin places, to use it, control it, but he's delusional. No one controls what lives on the other side. You mean spirits? Ghosts? No, Thomas said firmly. Not ghosts. Something older. Something that was here long before humans built on this land. Beverly leaned forward. The Chiquimacha tribe called them the Hungry Ones. They avoided this area entirely, said it was a place where the world was cracked. Dr. Vere thought they were evidence of the afterlife. Dr. Fontenot continued. He conducted experiments, trying to communicate with them. It ended in disaster in 1937. When the hospital reopened, Dr. Henri Cubideau established the rules as containment protocols. For almost 50 years, they worked. What changed? I asked. Hughes. Carlton spat the name like a curse. He found Verede's research notes in the hospital archives when he took over 10 years ago. He became obsessed with the idea of controlled communication, of using the entities for purposes. What purposes? Dr. Fontenot's expression darkened. Power? Knowledge? Extended life? The usual temptations. He believes the entities can grant these things in exchange for access to our world. The rules, I said slowly, understanding dawning. They're not just random superstitions. They're a system to regulate contact with these things. Exactly. Beverly nodded. Some rules keep them out entirely. Some allow limited interaction under controlled circumstances. Rule number 27 is different. It's an invitation, but on specific terms. I thought of the strange tasks I'd been performing. Checking room 204, making coffee no one drank, replacing working light bulbs. Even the seemingly mundane rules serve a purpose. They're like pressure valves, Thomas explained. Small, regulated exchanges that prevent bigger breaches. Carlton handed me a letter-bound journal. This belonged to Dr. Thibodeau. His observations, his development of the rule system. Read it. Understand what you're part of now. I flipped through the pages. Dense handwriting, diagrams, lists of incidents and outcomes. Why show me all this? Why trust me with this information? Because you're marked now, Dr. Fontenot said quietly. They've seen you, spoken to you directly. That changes things. And because we need help, Beverly added. Hughes is getting bolder. The anniversary was just the beginning. He's planning something bigger, a major breach of the boundaries. We've been watching him for years, Carlton said, documenting his violations, his experiments. But we need someone close to him, someone he thinks is receptive to his ideas. I stared at him in disbelief. You want me to spy on Dr. Hughes? After what I saw last night? We want you to help us stop him before he tears the veil completely. Dr. Fontenot corrected. Before he unleashes something none of us can contain. I'm just an orderly. I've only been there for 3 nights. 4, counting the anniversary, Beverly pointed out. And you've already been singled out. Hughes will approach you soon, offer you special training, more responsibility. He's always looking for new recruits. We're not asking you to decide right now, Carlton said. Take the journal. Read it. Your shift doesn't start until tomorrow night. Thomas leaned forward. But understand this. Whether you help us or not, you're part of it now. They know your name. They know your guilt. They know how to reach you. The meeting continued for another hour. They shared stories, encounters with the entities, near misses, friends and colleagues who'd been replaced after failed Rule Number 27 experiences. Each account was more disturbing than the last, painting a picture of Bayou Pines as something far more sinister than a simple psychiatric hospital. As the gathering broke up, Dr. Fontenot took me aside. There's something else you should know. About Adeline Robichaud in room 219. What about her? She didn't kill her husband. Not exactly. The doctor's voice dropped to a whisper. Her husband Walter worked at Bayou Pines in the 1970s, engineering department. He had his own Rule Number 27 experience, said yes when he should have said no. For 40 years, Adeline lived with what came home in Walter's body. I remembered Adeline's voice through the door. I can smell your guilt. It smells like burnt rubber and blood. What finally happened? After decades of torment, the real Adeline surfaced long enough to end it, to kill the thing wearing her husband's face. But the shock, the trauma, it fractured her mind. Dr. Fontenot squeezed my arm. Be careful around her. What's in room 219 isn't just a dementia patient. It's a battlefield. I left the Masonic Lodge with Dr. Thibodeau's journal clutched tightly under my arm, my mind reeling. The warm night air felt thick in my lungs. The cicadas' chorus from the surrounding woods suddenly ominous, rather than familiar. As I reached my car, I felt my phone vibrate. A text from an unknown number. Tomorrow night, my office after your shift. We have much to discuss. L.H. Dr. Landon Hughes was making his move, just as they'd predicted. I had less than 24 hours to decide whose side I was on, if there were really sides at all in this nightmare. I drove back to my apartment above Magnolia Cafe, the weight of Dr. Thibodeau's journal heavy in my lap. Whatever secrets it contained would determine my next steps. Whatever truths it revealed would shape my future at Bayou Pines, or my escape from it. If escape was still possible at all. Dr. Humry Thibodeau's journal was a descent into madness, or perhaps a terrifying ascent into clarity. I spent the day poring over its pages, the handwriting evolving from precise and academic to increasingly frantic as the entries progressed. The first section, dated 1949, documented Thibodeau's assignment to reopen Bayou Pines as a psychiatric facility after the 1937 disaster. March 12, 1949. Initial assessment of the Bayou Pines property reveals extensive fire damage to the east wing. Curious patterns of burn marks on the floors and walls, concentric circles, and triangular formations. Local workers refused to enter certain rooms, citing superstition. Construction delayed until specialists can be brought from New Orleans. April 3, 1949. Discovered a hidden repository of Dr. Augustin Verret's research notes in a sealed wall cavity. Disturbing content. His theories about liminal entities and dimensional convergence appear to be the ravings of a madman, yet the methodical documentation suggests otherwise. Most concerning, are the transcripts of communications with these supposed entities. April 17th, 1949. First anomalous occurrence. Lights in the main corridor activated despite disconnected power supply. Maintenance foreman Miller reported hearing voices from the decommissioned morgue. Upon investigation, found nothing, but temperature readings showed a 20-degree drop in the specific area where voices were reported. The early entries documented Thibodeau's skepticism gradually eroding as unexplainable events accumulated. By late 1949, he had begun formulating the first containment protocols, the precursors to the rules I had been following. November 8th, 1949. Breakthrough in containment theory. The entities seem bound by specific laws of interaction. They cannot initiate contact without invitation or breach, accidental or deliberate. Regular, controlled minor interactions appear to prevent pressure buildup that leads to major manifestations. Implementation of Protocol Series A begins tomorrow. November 12th, 1949. Protocol A7, scheduled maintenance of specific light fixtures, successful in reducing negative occurrences in East Wing. Protocol A-3, designated water offerings, less effective, requires refinement. November 30th, 1949. Orderly Jenkins violated Protocol A-11. Found in hydrotherapy room speaking fluent Sanskrit, a language he has no knowledge of. Removed from duty and transferred to 2-lane medical for observation. The protocols evolved over the years, refined through trial and error, often with horrific consequences for those who broke them. By 1952, Thibodeau had established most of the rules I recognized. February 15th, 1952. Complete protocol system now in place. 23 standard procedures, plus 6 conditional responses. Staff compliance improved after Davis incident. No major breaches for 3 months. March 4th, 1952. Nurse Laveau reported communicating with her deceased mother through the third-floor bathroom mirror. Protocol violation not yet identified. Implemented emergency protocol F-2, mirror restriction, and blessing of reflective surfaces. The middle section of the journal focused on Thibodeau's attempts to understand what exactly resided beyond the thin place at Bayou Pimes, June 18th, 1955. After extensive research into local indigenous history, discovered Chitimacha legends about this region. They called it Ma'at Kitute, the mouth that swallows dreams. Their shamans believed that certain locations served as doorways for ancient beings they called those who hunger for essence. These entities supposedly fed on human consciousness, emotion, and memory. October 31st, 1955, concerning development. Patient Marcus Williams in room 204, previously unremarkable case of paranoid schizophrenia, began speaking in multiple voices, reciting fragments of staff conversations that occurred in private. Isolation implemented immediately. I paused at this entry. Marcus Williams in room 204, the same room where Marcus Delacroix now stayed. I wondered if the room number was coincidental or deliberate. The later entries became increasingly paranoid, yet also more insightful. May 7th, 1963. The entities are not spirits of the dead, though they can access memories of the deceased and mimic their personalities. They are not demons in the Judeo-Christian sense. Though religious symbols do create barriers, they cannot easily penetrate. My current theory: they are non-corporeal intelligence that exists in dimensions adjacent to our own, able to perceive our reality, but unable to fully interact with it without a conduit. August 22nd, 1967. Critical discovery. The entities cannot directly lie, but they dissemble through selective truth and context manipulation. They require consent to fully manifest through a human vessel. The rules prevent accidental consent. Rule number 27 was created as a controlled test of direct communication with specific protective boundaries. The final section, written in the 1970s as Thibodeau approached retirement, contained his most disturbing revelations. January 10th, 1973. Long-term observation confirms my worst fears. Once an entity has established a connection with a specific human, that connection persists beyond the walls of Bayou Pines. They can track their marked subjects indefinitely. Distance provides some buffer, but not complete protection. March 3rd, 1974. Walter Robichaud from engineering accepted the offer during his Rule number 27 experience last night. By morning, subtle changes already evident. Speech patterns altered, memory inconsistencies, pupillary response abnormal. Yet he passed all standard psychiatric evaluations. The replacement is nearly perfect. Walter Robichaud, Adeline's husband. The journal provided the missing pieces of her tragic story. December 18th, 1976, my retirement approaching. Concerned about succession. The board selected replacement doctor. Wilson lacks the necessary sensitivity to the unique properties of Bayou Pines. I have documented the complete rule system with underlying principles in a separate volume to be stored in the secure archives. May God forgive me for what I've perpetuated here in the name of containment. The final entry sent chills down my spine. February 2nd, 1977. I'm being watched. Not just by the board or the staff, but by them. They know I'm leaving. They've offered me knowledge beyond human understanding if I stay. The temptation is immense. I must resist. The rules must be maintained. If they ever find someone willing to systematically dismantle the protocols, God help us all. I closed the journal, my mind reeling with implications. The hospital wasn't just built on a thin place. It had been deliberately maintained as a controlled environment for interacting with these entities. The rules weren't superstitions. They were a sophisticated system designed to allow minimal contact while preventing full incursion. And Dr. Hughes was actively working to break that system. I checked my watch, 6:30 p.m. My shift started at 11 p.m., followed by my meeting with Hughes. I needed to make a decision, help Carlton and the others, or try to distance myself from the whole situation. As if in response to my thoughts, my phone chimed with a text from Carlton. Made your choice yet? Before I could reply, someone knocked at my apartment door. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole to see Beverly standing in the hallway, looking nervously over her shoulder. "What are you doing here?" I asked after opening the door. She pushed past me into the apartment. "Hughes knows about the meeting last night." Someone talked. Her voice was tight with fear. "He's accelerated his timeline. Tonight." "What's happening tonight?" "A mass breach attempt. He's been identifying specific patients and staff with strong connections to the entities. At precisely 12:17 a.m., he's going to deliberately break 7 critical rules simultaneously." She ran a shaking hand through her gray hair. "It's a calculated risk on his part. He thinks he can control what comes through. And you don't believe that. You've read Thibodeau's journal. You've experienced what happens when even one rule is broken." Beverly's eyes were wide with fear. "Hughes is playing with forces beyond his comprehension. What can we do?" "Dr. Fontenot has a plan, a counter-ritual of sorts, based on Thibodeau's emergency protocols." She handed me a sealed envelope. "Your part is in here. Memorize it, then burn the paper. Don't open it until you're inside the hospital." "Why me?" "I'm the newest staff member." "Because you're marked but not compromised. The entities recognize you now, which gives your actions weight in their reality. Beverly glanced at her watch. I need to warn the others. Be careful tonight. Trust no one inside those walls except Carlton and me. After she left, I sat on the edge of my bed, the unopened envelope in my hands. Dr. Thibodeau's journal beside me. The sensible part of me screamed to pack my things and drive away. Head to Texas or Arkansas or anywhere far from Louisiana and its thin places. But even as I considered escape, I knew it wasn't that simple. The journal made it clear. Once marked, the connection remained. Distance might dilute it, but never sever it completely. And if Hughes succeeded tonight, nowhere would be safe. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with instructions written in Dr. Fontenot's precise handwriting. The plan was simple but dangerous. While Hughes was conducting his breach ritual, I would need to implement specific countermeasures in key locations throughout the hospital. I memorized the instructions, then burned the paper in my kitchen sink as directed. As I watched the ash swirl down the drain, I wondered if I was making a terrible mistake by getting further involved. My phone chimed again. Another text from Carlton. Hughes has replaced 3 security guards with his own people. Be careful who you talk to tonight. I texted back. I'm in. I arrived at Bayou Pines earlier than usual, parking in the far corner of the lot where the security cameras had a blind spot. Carlton had identified. The hospital looked unchanged from the outside. Same imposing Victorian architecture, same murky bayou stretching behind it. But knowing what I knew now, the building seemed to pulse with malevolent potential, like a living organism disguised as brick and mortar. Carlton met me at the side entrance, his expression grim. Hughes has called a staff meeting at 11:30. Says it's about updated security protocols. That's when he'll put his people in position. What about the regular rules? Won't breaking them cause problems before his planned breach? He's maintaining essential containment until the last moment. The coffee, the light bulb, room 204, those will proceed normally. Carlton handed me something small and cold. Another saint. Benedict metal. Keep this with you. It won't stop them, but it'll slow them down if things go sideways. Inside, the hospital felt different. The air was heavier, charged with anticipation. Patients who were normally sedated at this hour paced their rooms restlessly. As I passed room 204, I heard Marcus speaking rapidly in a language I didn't recognize. Beverly was at the nurse's station, her movements mechanical as she distributed evening medications. She gave me a barely perceptible nod as I passed. The night shift began with its usual routines. I checked room 204 at 11:15 p.m. Marcus was in bed, but his eyes were open, tracking my movements with unnerving intensity. I made the coffee at midnight, replaced the light bulb at 2:15 a.m. On the surface, everything proceeded normally. Underneath, a current of tension built minute by minute, like the pressure before a thunderstorm. At 11:30 p.m., all available staff gathered in the conference room. Dr. Hughes stood at the front, immaculate in his white coat, the strange medallion prominently displayed around his neck. Thank you all for coming, he began smoothly. As you know, patient security is our primary concern at Bayou Pines. Tonight, we're implementing enhanced protocols for our more sensitive cases. As he spoke, his eyes found mine in the crowd. A slight smile curved his lips, as if we shared a secret. I maintained a neutral expression, acutely aware of the saint. Benedict metal in my pocket. The stage was set. The countdown to 12:17 a.m. had begun. Whatever happened next would determine not just my fate, but potentially the barrier between our world and whatever waited hungrily on the other side. 3 months have passed since that night at Bayou Pines. 3 months since the hospital's east wing burned to the ground in what official reports called an electrical fire. 3 months since 7 patients and 4 staff members, including Dr. Landon Hughes, were listed as missing, presumed dead. I still work the night shift, though the hospital operates at reduced capacity now. The rules remain in place, some modified, some strengthened. We check room 204 at 11:15 p.m., though it houses a different patient now. We make coffee in the blue mug at midnight. We replace the light bulb in the corridor at 2:15 a.m. Some nights, when the air is heavy with humidity and the cicadas fall suddenly silent, I can still hear the whispers from beyond the thin place. Promises, threats, temptations. They know my name. They remember my face. They'll never truly let me go. I still live above Magnolia Cafe in St. Francisville. Miss Jeanette still leaves gumbo outside my door on bad days. I've stopped making plans to leave. What would be the point? As Dr. Thibodeau's journal made clear, distance provides only the illusion of safety. The night of Hughes's attempted breach replays in my dreams. The confrontation in the modified chapel, the 7 patients chanting in unison, the medallion around Hughes's neck glowing with sickly light as the veil between worlds thinned to transparent gauze. Dr. Fontenot's countermeasures created a feedback loop in whatever mechanism Hughes had established, a controlled explosion of energy rather than the systematic dismantling of barriers he'd planned. When it was over, when the smoke cleared and the screaming stopped, Hughes was gone. Not dead, at least not in any conventional sense. The thing that came through in those final moments took him as a parting gift before the breach sealed itself. Carlton now serves as interim director. Beverly retired, moved to her sister's place in Baton Rouge. We still meet monthly at the Masonic Lodge with the others who know the truth, the custodians of Bayou Pines' secrets, the guardians of the thin place. I visited Ellie's grave in Lafayette Cemetery last week. The real Ellie, not the thing that wore her face in the chapel. I told her everything. About the hospital, the entities, the ongoing battle to maintain the boundaries. In the quiet of that historic graveyard, surrounded by above-ground tombs and the scent of magnolias, I finally accepted what I've become. A keeper of rules, a watcher at the threshold. Some nights I hear Ellie's voice in my dreams, but I've learned to distinguish between true memory and mimicry. The entities are persistent, but they're not infallible. They access our fears and guilt, but they can never truly understand human connection, human love. Room 219 is empty now. Adeline Robichaud passed away peacefully in her sleep a month after Hughes' failed breach. The night nurse found her with a smile on her face, the first genuine expression of peace she'd shown in decades. Whatever battle had raged within her was finally over. New staff come and go at Bayou Pines. Few last more than a week. Those who stay learn the rules, sense the weight behind them. Some join our group eventually, once they've had their own brushes with the thin place. I still have the Saint Benedict medal. It sits on my bedside table beside Dr. Thibodeau's journal and a photograph of Ellie. Small talismans against the darkness. Tonight, I'll return to Bayou Pines for another shift. I'll check room 204 at 11:15 p.m. I'll make coffee in the blue mug at midnight. I'll follow every rule with precision and purpose. Not out of fear, though the fear remains, out of understanding. The rules aren't just for survival. They're a responsibility, a covenant with forces beyond our comprehension. And in this strange, liminal existence I now inhabit, not quite free, not quite trapped, I found an unexpected purpose. As long as Bayou Pines stands, as long as the thin place remains, Someone must keep watch. Someone must follow the rules.